The hegemony of Western media as, being the most objective, the most dedicated to the truth, and being the most unbiased is seriously being challenged right now.
Welcome to Taylor's Take. I'm Yenro, and today we'll be talking about how old media and new media impact the narrative of current events such as the Palestine and Israel conflict. Today we have Dr. Benjamin here with us. He's our lecturer from the Bachelor of Mass Communication program. So Dr. Benjamin, what do you think about the entire situation in a journalistic context?
I think in terms of the media perspective, I think it's definitely a very complicated issue. And I think for a lot of people, we are sort of seeing a huge shift in the way that people look at the credibility of what we perceive to be reputable journalism institutions. We're talking about Western media that we consider to be bastions of freedom of speech and also of really good objective journalism institutions such as the BBC, sort of like New York Times, and even sort of like CNN to a certain degree. And you can sort of clearly tell that many of these outlets are presenting the Israel-Palestine conflict in a way that it very clearly sides with the Israeli side of the narrative, essentially. And because of social media, you can sort of see how people are, whenever any of this information is being presented from these media, people can therefore counter that directly on social media. They can also present reporting that comes from the non-Western side of the media as well. So it's a very, very interesting point because for a long time, the hegemony of Western media as being the most objective, the most dedicated to the truth, and being the most unbiased is seriously being challenged right now because of this conflict that's going on. Western journalism has always been seen as sort of like the main source of information for a lot of people internationally, even if, like I said, if you disagree with it. But without that, what are the alternatives that we have? And I think that's where a lot of people are going through a bit of a crisis phase now at this point, because who can we rely on for independently sourced news? And if our main institutions are not going to be reliable, that means we need to go to the much more smaller, much more fringe institutions. For instance, one of the ways in which people get information now is actually through listening to podcasts. It's ironic that we mentioned it on a show like this. So based on this, have you feel that your opinion of sort of like Western media has changed as a result of this?
Honestly, yes, because of how unreliable it is based on the words they use. It's really important in journalism. You sort of want to know where to get the right sources to educate yourself. Recently, there are a lot of misinformation on the internet. Here is what is right. Here is what is factual. Right now, we're trying to rely on the media, but at the same time, a lot of Western media, they're quite biased towards the issue. So now we don't know who to trust. That's what we're afraid of.
The clearest indication of the bias that really took place happened only a few days, whereby in a single tweet that was put up by the BBC, which I think is still up until today, they were highlighting the number of casualties on Israel and also in Gaza, and they described the casualties in Israel as people being killed, and they describe the casualties in Gaza as people having died. They are trying to downplay a lot of those negative effects, and you can sort of see it very, very clearly.
Even if you get news from news websites or social media, there are a lot of information to consume and to digest. So how do you pick the right information?
So one of my main research areas is what we call media literacy. The idea here is that people need to be equipped with the means to sort of process and understand the news, the information that's being presented to them, sort of critically assess whether this is actual news or is this misinformation or disinformation. A lot of these so-called independent and more citizen-based journalism are becoming people's number one source of information, which is a problem in itself, because many of the people who run these podcasts, these blogs, little media sites on their own, they often have agendas that they're not most transparent about in that sense. So that's another issue that is also very problematic.
What do you think are the difference between a citizen journalist and a professional journalist covering the conflict?
Back then, there was no social media. There was very limited ways that people can actually get access to information on their own. They could only get the latest news from the media itself. So now we're in a situation where people can independently get their news information. And at the same time, because social media is a lot quicker, people can just post, citizen journalists can just post all their information and news faster than most news outlets, but again, they don't have the same standards. The reason why news outlets are supposed to be slower is because they need to double check things, they need to fact check, they need to verify these things, and also they need to ensure that are we actually reporting, because what we're seeing may not even be the full picture. And sometimes citizen journalists miss a lot of those important details that they present, and then that can cause a lot of issues that happen later on. It is now very, very prudent that individuals themselves be equipped with the tools necessary to critically assess if whatever information that they are receiving is that accurate information and can they trust it as well. So media literacy is the way forward. That is an unfortunate aspect of what we need to do.
Yeah. I hope everyone has learned something from our conversation today, and thank you for watching Taylor's Take. I hope to see you all soon. Bye!